Join the Coven. Today's video is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering my listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/GothicRose and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title for free and start listening. It's that easy. Just go to audibletrial.com/GothicRose to get started today. I'm a guard stationed at a secret government prison. A story written by Mr. Outlaw. Part 3. Just ignore it. It was a job easier said than done. And honestly, was it even a good idea? In my head, I ran through the list of potential voids that could have been lurking behind us. Of course, none of them were really ideal, especially not the rowdy clown, whose laugh sounded hauntingly similar to the one we were hearing behind us. And then we heard it again, louder this time. I muttered a barely audible "damn" in response. Realistically, if it did turn out to be one of the voids, putting up some kind of resistance would have been pointless anyway. We were as good as done for. With that logic in mind, I turned my attention back to the monitors, hoping that whatever the hell was behind us would stay put for a bit longer. In the meantime, Hugo and Kale were about to fight the gladiator and his minions.
"Hey, Englishman,"
Kale said.
"You regenerate quickly?"
Hugo sighed, stretching his neck out. "First of all, don't call me that. It's rather crass, and no, not much faster than the average man, but no matter. God has ordained me a holy commission. He won't let me die until I've fulfilled my duty." Kale just laughed.
"You're a real piece of work, British boy. Let's see if your God helps us make it out of this."
"You two aren't who I'm looking for," the gladiator bellowed before releasing both leashes. "Take out the trash." The freak ran about 6 steps before having his face caved in and neck subsequently snapped by Hugo. In the meantime, the centipede began crawling towards Kale.
"Who the hell created this thing?"
he asked, shuddering slightly. The centipede lifted itself up, swiping 2 of its arms at the visibly disturbed vampire.
"Don't touch me!"
he shouted before kicking its face, removing its muzzle in the process. He regretted that decision instantly. The centipede had 4 or 5 rows of spike-like teeth, with a horde of flesh-covered tentacles squirming out of its mouth. One of them grabbed Kale by the leg, dragging him down.
"God damn it!"
he shouted, attempting to squirm out of the appendage's grasp. Nevertheless, Hugo came to the rescue, turning the centipede's head into mush with one vicious stomp. He shot Kale a cold gaze. "Take his name in vain again, and our temporary alliance is over." Kale shook the tentacle remnants off his leg, his face still utterly disgusted. Yeah.
"Holy freaking hell, this is nasty."
And they both stared at the gladiator, who was grinning something malicious. "Congratulations. You two have earned the privilege of being my combat slaves."
"I would literally rather die,"
Kale responded. "I submit myself to God and God only. Diseases like you shall perish at his will," Hugo added. The gladiator drew his smoldering sword, which must have been the size of a person. Then so be it, he roared. The two rushed him simultaneously, attempting to bury the burning menace with a flurry of quick strikes. But that wasn't the best idea. They couldn't even touch the gladiator without suffering from burns themselves. Kale sighed.
Some jerk just had to dig this freak up, didn't they?
The gladiator stepped forward, unleashing a big swing that singed a few hairs off Hugo's head. Bastard! He shouted before sending a hard cross at the gladiator, shattering his chestplate armor in the process.
You're pretty strong there, Britt. We just might win this one.
Kale grinned. Like I said, God will give me enough strength to overcome these trials. Hugo moved towards the gladiator with the seemingly unwavering resolve, his eyes shining a bright crimson. His face was wrought with such intense, stoic determination that I nearly forgot his ultimate goal was to commit global genocide and began cheering him on. The gladiator sneered at the challenge, swinging his blade once again. This time, Hugo deflected it with an elbow, cracking the metal while doing so. He followed up by directing a flying hook kick at the gladiator's jaw, managing to rip it off completely. Kale followed up by biting into the gladiator's shoulder and tearing a large chunk off, burning most of his face in the process.
Ugh!
He said, spitting out the charred, undead flesh.
Not my cup of tea.
Are you all right? Hugo asked, staring at his scorched face.
Yeah, should heal up in no time.
However, the gladiator was relentless, letting out a frenzied roar before bolting towards Kale. He managed to dodge most of the gladiator's blows, only taking the full brunt of his last punch. Still, that one blow was enough to form a deep, fleshy crater in his torso while sending him flying into the steel rail, causing it to bend.
Damn it!
Kale stammered out, staring down at the unsightly wound.
Nope. That's not good. Gonna take longer to heal.
Hugo exhaled. The situation has become bothersome. He went back after the gladiator, sending a ruthless barrage of strikes his way. There was an evident skill gap between the two voids, with Hugo landing about 90% of his attacks. On the other hand, the gladiator only managed to land 3 or 4 clean hits of his own. Nevertheless, each one of those hits dealt far more damage than any of Hugo's. After about a minute of fighting, Hugo's left arm was completely mangled. His right rib cage had been shattered, and the entire right side of his face was burnt. The gladiator had also taken a fair amount of damage, but not nearly enough to even slow it down. Kale groaned as he attempted to insert himself back in the fight, but that task wasn't an easy one. He could hardly move with his torso just about completely destroyed. I suppose this must be my final trial, Hugo said somewhat solemnly.
Ugh, what the hell are you talking about?
Kale asked, still groaning. And then, for the first time since we began watching, Hugo smiled. God wills it. Using his good arm, Hugo removed the upper section of his robe, revealing a pale, mutilated, scar-ridden body underneath. He muttered another prayer before looking up at the ceiling, tears now swelling up in his eyes. Thank you, he muttered. Along with his eyes, the scars on his body suddenly began glowing a deep red. Tricks won't be enough, the gladiator thundered before swinging his blade at Hugo's neck. I don't think I managed to catch exactly what happened next. However, I was certain that I was about to see a head rolling. Instead, the gladiator's blade shattered into what looked like 1,000,000 pieces. At first, I didn't even notice the gaping hole in the gladiator's chest.
How did you...
The gladiator was interrupted by his neck being brutally cranked to the side. As the flaming behemoth dropped, so did Hugo. By then, Cale had regenerated to the point of being able to walk. He stumbled over to the near comatose bishop.
What the hell was that?
He said, half grinning.
I detached myself from earthly limitations. An egregious sin. But I needed to fulfill my holy mission. Well, hell, that's pretty cool, I guess. Not your psycho mission, but the whole detachment thing.
He held out his hand in an attempt to help Hugo get up. However, Hugo shook his head in response.
This is how far I go. Not something I can recover from. I only have judgment to face now. Oh, shut the hell up,
Cale said, picking up Hugo's limp body and lumbering it over his shoulder.
We'll find you some painkillers and then you'll be back on your feet in no time. Why would you help me?
Hugo asked.
You understand what I'm after, don't you? My ideals. Well, I don't think I could have handled the gladiator on my own, so I guess I owe you, you crazy freak.
He looked over at Hugo and grinned.
And who knows, maybe you'll learn something, yeah? There's a lot of scum in this world, but there's also a lot of beauty. We don't have to destroy it all. That's...
Hugo passed out before he could finish his thought. Still carrying him over his shoulder, Cale took off running down another corridor. I did a quick sweep of the other monitors. Satanbot had taken out 2 more lower-tier voids, while Morgie was engaged with a high hurricane void named the Mechanic. 6'5", 196 centimeters, 270 pounds, 122 kilograms. Like the name suggested, he was a large, burly man in a mechanic outfit that enjoyed obliterating skulls with blunt tools. Real ruthless guy. On another monitor, the undead Nazi had just finished slicing the hell out of the devil nurse, who was a mid-tsunami. So that's 12 down, I thought. 20 left. The show wasn't anywhere near done. Check it out, Sandu said. There's still 4 voids who haven't escaped yet. Sure enough, he was right. First off, there was the Titan, 15-7, 475 centimeters, 1,438 pounds, 652 kilograms. A colossal entity with destructive capabilities that were nigh impossible to deal with. It was humanoid with an immensely muscular frame, further accentuated by the fact there wasn't an ounce of fat on his entire body. Its harder-than-steel skin was reddish and cracked all over, with a road map of razor-like veins bulging out at every square inch. And then there was the face. It had 6 sets of glowing blue eyes and a mouthful of fangs with exposed gums that were caustic to the touch. His holding cell, if you can even call it that, was a bit more fortified than the rest. I'm under-exaggerating, of course. It was fortified to goddamn hell. No electronic locks connected to a central system either, which is probably what caused the breach to begin with. Good thing, too, he was a low asteroid. The next one up was the Warden, 8'7", 261 centimeters, 435 pounds, 197 kilograms. Ironically, though, this guy apparently used to run a prison of his own. What kind of prison that might be was beyond me. He had pale white skin, shadow-like eyes, and long, slicked back, silver hair. His trench coat was long and perpetually bloody, sweeping the floor as he walked. I've heard stories about the guy, Supposedly he killed upwards of 700 prisoners during a breach at his prison, managing to come out unscathed from a devastating explosion afterwards. He was as dangerous as a void could get without being considered asteroid tier, being a high earthquake. Funnily enough, his cell was wide open, with guard bodies and destroyed mech suits littering the space, but instead of getting up and walking out, he simply sat, expression devoid of anything at all, like it usually was. Obviously, he was up to nothing good. The next one was quite the doozy, the strongest void in the entire chasm, in fact. It went by a simple moniker, the Calamity of Earth, or just the Calamity for short. Its gender was unknown, height and weight unknown, appearance unknown to everybody except for the top officials overseeing this entire operation. Hell, we didn't even know where it was kept. The only thing we had to monitor was a simple panel containing 3 lights. Green, safe, still contained. Yellow, breakout in progress, evacuate immediately. Red, breached, too late. What did we know about this thing? Nothing, save for the fact that a breach would most likely result in a global catastrophe. Of course, it was a high asteroid, the only high asteroid in fact. And then there was the last still captive void, but unlike the 3 overpowered monsters I've already talked about, he was a lot different. The kid, 5'6", 168 centimeters, 142 pounds, 64 kilograms. As his name implies, the kid was just that, a kid. From his appearance, he couldn't have been much older than 16, 17 at most. The only thing we knew about him was that he apparently had extraordinary, undisclosed abilities he used to slaughter his entire village back in Kerala, India. But who the hell knows what actually happened? To me, and nearly every guard, he just seemed like your average meek teenager. In fact, we rarely ever exercised caution around him. Unlike the rest of the voids in here, he just did as he was told, always with incredibly sullen expression on his face. I suppose I can't blame him, given the circumstances. We didn't even bother putting a threat level on him. Nevertheless, we were instructed to keep him there. There's a lot of stuff going on here in the chasm that us guards don't quite understand. I make no reservations about that. I know for a damn fact that we're not doing any saintly work here. Do a lot of voids in here deserve to be locked up? Not even. They deserve to be wiped off the face of the earth. I never understood why we bothered holding the more malicious ones, using taxpayer money just to keep them alive. And then there were the ones who I wasn't quite sure belonged here at all. Did they even do anything wrong? Who knows? But one thing was for sure, they were different. Exceptional, I guess. The subjects of state curiosity. I always tried suppressing these thoughts. I mean, who the hell was I? Just some random guard. Not some arbiter of morality still. Screw it. This is not the time. So let's see what happened next. I turned to face a random monitor, trying to take my mind off the kid. I caught what appeared to be the middle of a fight, with the 2 combatants being Jack the Ripper, 6'1", 185 centimeters, 170 pounds, 77 kilograms, the infamous serial killer. Apparently he had performed some arcane ritual while on death's door that granted him an extended lifespan and superhuman strength in exchange for what was left of his already dwindling humanity. He hardly resembled a human when we caught him, with a mouthful of sharp, rotting teeth, his eyes sunken beyond reason, and a face riddled with cuts, burns, and various infections. He was quite the sore sight to behold. At that moment, he was once again on death's door. The person who put him there? Bella Vauclane, aka the Bloody Painter, 5'5", 165 centimeters, 122 pounds, 55 kilograms. Despite looking more or less like a normal woman, she was a brutal assassin that wasn't too concerned with the aftermaths of her jobs. After killing her target, she'd paint a bloody picture on the walls. Sometimes she'd supplement her art with a few organs. She wasn't incredibly strong, but that didn't matter all too much. She had this obscure ability where she could summon blades out of thin air at the tips of her fingers, and then use some super Esper-like ability to shoot them off in rapid succession, almost at a machine gun-like rate of fire. She had no problems reducing her targets to mincemeat, the ones she really disliked, that is. When we finally captured her, she maintained that she only killed the ones that really deserved it. However, any chance of appeal, not that there was any chance to begin with, was shattered when she punctured the throats of 4 guards. She still claims that it was an accident to this day. Do I believe her? Well, it's about 50-50 with me. Like I said, she had Jack on the ropes, with what must have been over 100 blades planted firmly within the killer's body, including both of his eyes. Still, he had yet to give up as he swung Wirehead's bat. He must have picked it up blindly and wildly around him. Bella wasn't unscathed herself, though. It looked as if she had taken a couple of pretty bad hits to her ribs and thigh. In addition to that, she had a gnarly bite mark on her hand. Nevertheless, she smiled as she pointed her finger like a pistol at the frenzied Jack.
Enjoy hell,
she said before blasting the killer to shreds, finally ending his grim legacy. Once she was done with that, she let out a loud sigh, clutching her ribs and wincing in pain. Unlike most of the other voids, she wasn't capable of taking too much punishment. After walking for a bit, she came across Luz. While still badly mangled from his confrontation with Wirehead, he was walking again. I didn't even know that he could regenerate that quickly. The two stared at each other for about half a minute before Bella stuck out her hand and smiled. It was a risk for sure, but while Luz didn't reciprocate the smile, he cooperated, accepting the handshake without electrocuting her. Another team up, and one that I wouldn't necessarily have expected. I did another quick sweep of the monitors. Morgie had taken out the mechanic, although he was limping now, and his next fight wasn't going to be an easy one. He was a few steps coming across Satanbot. In the meantime, and funnily enough, the undead Nazi was about to square off with the sadistic Soviet. 6'2", 187 centimeters, 215 pounds, 98 kilograms. Low earthquake tier. Instead of being zombified like the Nazi, he was more mechanical. More specifically, he was about 60% robotic, with his human bits slowly beginning to rot away. The surgeon was engaged in a bloody duel with Spider-Man. 6'9", 206 centimeters, 225 pounds, 102 kilograms. Unlike Peter Parker, this guy was basically just a large tarantula with human skin and a half-human head. Kill and Hugo were in the medical center, with the former tending to the latter's wounds. I thought about everything for a second, trying to run the numbers through my head. There were 4 more voids who had decidedly escaped that I hadn't yet seen on any of the monitors, but I was really only concerned about 2 of them. You see, within the chasm, there were 4 asteroid tier voids in total. Only 2 of them were still contained. The problem was rather obvious. Beyond that, there were now 14 voids dead, 4 who still haven't joined the fight, 14 currently active, all 4 asteroids still in play, 3 high earthquakes as well, TFVNH likely on their way. Holy hell, I thought to myself. The real fight hasn't even started yet. All of a sudden, raucous laughter nearly gave me a heart attack. I looked at Sandu, but his face was dead serious. That meant crap. With everything that was going on, I completely forgot about the elephant in the room. But sure enough, they were finally ready to reveal themselves. As footsteps began emanating from the darkness behind us, I braced myself for whatever horrific entity we were surely about to encounter. But instead of that, it was an unfamiliar guy that looked like to be in his mid-20s with messy, dirty blonde hair, dressed in a Hawaiian shirt and khaki shorts. He was probably around 5'10", 130 pounds, soaking wet. "What the hell?" Sandu said upon seeing him. The man continued laughing as he strolled towards us. "Oh, man," he blurted out in between chuckles. "There's crap in both of your pants right now, isn't there? Don't lie to me. The joke's gone on long enough." "Who the hell are you?" Sandu asked, somewhat agitated. The man put up his arms in an ostensibly defensive manner. "Relax, I'm just an observer here." But his bloodshot eyes seemed to bulge out as they wandered over to the monitors. "It looks like the preliminaries are over. Time for the good stuff." Part 4. "I'm so sorry. I forgot to introduce myself." The man stepped towards us with a gaze that I can only describe as volatile. Perhaps, in the moment, he had no ill intent, but there were volcanoes behind his eyes, volcanoes that looked ready to erupt at any damn point. For that reason, I found myself slowly backing away. But not Sandu. For whatever reason, he stood his ground, facing the strange man without reservation. I suppose it also helped that he was 6'4", with a considerably larger frame. "The name's Adrian Nyquist," he said, his voice nearly shaking with some kind of obscure excitement. He held out his hand, but neither of us bothered with the niceties of the introduction. He sighed. "Was it me?" He lifted his shirt collar, taking a whiff. "Oof, you gotta shower more, Adrian." He then started laughing again. "But can you blame me? I've been busy." "Who the hell are you?" Sandu insisted. "And don't just tell us your name again." "Okay," Adrian said, smirking. "Big guy. Scary stuff, really. What'd you bench? 3 plates and a bit?" Sandu opened his mouth again, but was interrupted. "It's fine, though. I'll go ahead and explain myself. I mean, the whole situation is kind of weird." "Yep," I responded. "Just kind of." Adrian sat down on the floor and let out a big puff of air. "I don't really want to go too in-depth here. I don't enjoy talking about myself, so let me drop the bomb on you first. I caused the breach." I nearly swallowed my tongue. "What? What the hell do you mean?" "I meant what I said. I let all the prisoners out." "But what? How?" I stammered out. He tilted his head back and groaned before pretending to type on an invisible keyboard. "Just a little hacking, man. Nothing crazy. And they say that you'll never use the skills you learn in school in real life." "Hacking?" I responded in disbelief. "But why?" Well, that's where it does get a little crazy. Now, have you ever hopped dimensions? Have I ever freaking what? Oh, right. I see you're an uninitiated with the concept. Well, unlike hacking some corny lock system, the logistics there really do get complicated. I'll admit that I don't 100% understand it myself, but I understand it just enough to have some fun. I was at a complete loss. I'm a jumper. That's what they call us, he chuckled somewhat goofily. Still a novice, but at least I'm out there doing it, living life, you know? Anyway, the multiverse is massive, obviously. A lot of crazy worlds out there just waiting to be explored. But, he paused. I made a mistake last month, you see. I was watching some brutal big stakes fighting tournament called the Evisceration Championships on a planet called the Hellscape. Real messed up place, but drug laws are mostly enforced there, so you know, it's alright, I guess. Anyway, I'm up in the stands, 12th row, just blitzed out of my mind on Astro Coke. It's like regular Coke if regular Coke was actually good. He blew his nose into a disgusting handkerchief. But sometimes you make some bad decisions when you're juiced. I guess school taught us something else, huh? Long story short, I made a deal with some sketchy intergalactic gang leader called Bones the Fourth, that I'd provide him a fighter that would guarantee him a win for the next tournament. But obviously, I was just talking crap. Not sure why the guy believed me, an Astro Cokehead of all people. He burst out laughing again. I'll never understand the rich. Okay, I responded, barely comprehending what I'd just been told. Assuming what you just said is all true, and that you're not completely freaking bonkers, why don't you just tell the guy that you don't have a fighter? Well, Adrian made a whoopsie gesture with his hand. The guy paid up front, a metric of intergalactic currency, about 22 kilograms, 50 pounds of Astro Coke. Then just go to him and give it back. All right, Mr. Self-Control, teach me your secrets. Look, I've blown all the money. I still have a few kilograms of it left, though. For a rainy day? I'm not sharing, by the way. So what the hell? This whole thing's some freaked up tournament to you? You're just gonna drag the last void standing to fight in these evisceration matches? Well, it's less of a tournament and more of a haphazard free-for-all. I'm no logistics expert after all. I didn't know what the hell I was supposed to say to the guy. If you're behind the breach, then you're responsible for the deaths of hundreds of guards, hundreds of good men, Sandu coughed. Most of them good men. Adrian rolled his eyes. Yeah, okay. Real loss, huh? I'm just trying to live my life here, man. You're insane. Look, did that comment get us anywhere? You feel better now after stating the obvious? No reply from Sandu. Adrian sighed. Look, can we just enjoy the show now? What's done is done. He was interrupted by Sandu trying to tackle him to the ground. The man did know his jiu-jitsu, but no luck. He couldn't even get Adrian to budge. I saw the veins in his forehead bulging as he apparently exerted all of his strength trying to subdue the strange, lanky man. Damn, he said through gritted teeth. This guy's strong. Adrian simply pulled out a pack of cigarettes, looking completely unbothered. You know, I've taken a lot of strange drugs from a lot of different dimensions. One of them was bound to be a steroid. Also, he said, he began grinning like a maniac, I'm no stranger to training. Wouldn't survive out there if I was weak like you guys. He picked up Sandhu by the collar and gently tossed him back. Given the circumstances, I'll forget that you just tried attacking me. Now why don't we just sit tight and watch? I held up a hand. One last question, if you will. Adrian rolled his eyes and groaned like a child. Ugh, come on, we're missing the good stuff. Fine, hurry up. The last void's standing. They're bound to be pretty strong, right? Adrian nodded. Stronger than you? Well, no duh. I'm not trying to grab some chump. Okay, so how the hell are you going to convince them to come with you? These prisoners aren't exactly reasonable. Adrian stared at me with just about the stupidest look on his face for about 10 seconds. Well, you know what they say, he cracked his knuckles. You've got to live in the now. You're an idiot. Would an idiot get this far? The idiot had a point, but if he was really the mastermind behind the breach, then the guy had some wicked skills, but at the same time, his common sense was close to non-existent. Whatever, I'll figure it out when the time comes, he said. In the meantime, he shot us both a rather menacing glare. Let's enjoy the damn show. I locked eyes briefly with Sandhu. I understood why he was angry. I was too. However, the situation was really beyond helping. We could only do as we were told. While we've been talking, the Nazi had defeated the Soviet. Although he did suffer gruesome injuries from the bout, a portion of his gas mask had been shattered, revealing a rotting jaw underneath. In fact, his entire body had been pummeled to a near pulp as he struggled to limp along the rails. Adrian grunted. Great! We missed the World War II rematch. I hope you guys are happy with yourself. The guy really was like a child, a really capable, psychotic child. In other news, Satanbot had blown up Morgie, along with an entire corridor, while the surgeon had made a surprise discovery after disemboweling the spider's abdomen. It was filled with about 200 smaller humanoid spiders that began swarming him. It was hard not to shudder at the sight. Bella and Luz looked like they were still trying to find a way out, while Kale and Hugo had encountered the rowdy clown, 7'8", 234 centimeters, 177 pounds, 80 kilograms. Rowdy really was something else. His appearance didn't just make you fear clowns in the carnival. He made you fear life itself. An impossibly tall, skinny, and pale ghoul-like humanoid dressed in a bloody, dirty 1960s clown costume with twitching, twig-like fingers and cracked red lips enveloping a mouth filled with sharp, sticky black teeth. And then there was the fact that he had no eyes and two thin, bleeding slits for a nose. I do wonder what kind of god could have created such an entity. But he wasn't terribly strong, only being a mid-tsunami. Rowdy spat a mouthful of dark, gooey spit at Kale, dissolving the right side of his face.
Ugh!
Kale muttered, trying to wipe the ungodly substance away, only to pull apart bits of his flesh and muscle in the process.
Just nuke this place.
Rowdy began cackling, like the hellish fiend he was, swinging a lead balloon attached to barbed wire right at the still injured Hugo's head. However, Kale managed to intercept it at the last moment, breaking his own hand in the process. Suddenly, a pair of giant bat-like wings sprouted from his back. He flew backwards, Rowdy, before drop-kicking his head clean off.
That seems like something you should have used earlier,
Hugo remarked nonchalantly.
You know, I would, but doing so makes me feel pretty gross.
I decided to check back on the surgeon, but he was gone. Oh no, I muttered as I began seeing the black haze around me. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder, followed by a high-pitched, slimy voice that oozed its way into my ears. You guys got me out of a real sticky situation there. Hesitantly, I looked up at the surgeon's cold, dark gaze as he grinned like a maniac down at me. And then his neck was twisted a full 360 degrees. As he dropped, Aiden let out a big breath of air, stretching out his knuckles. Guy broke the rules. No running from a fight. Besides, he was weak. Wouldn't have stood a chance in the evisceration matches anyway. Is he dead? I stammered out, looking down at the limp surgeon. Yeah, Adrian responded. I shook my head in disbelief. But we've put sniper bullets through his temple. How did you... Adrian shot me a smug grin. Like I said, y'all are just weak. Now keep watching. Things are getting interesting. A few moments later, the Nazi came across the remnants of the spider and its hatchlings, torching them to ashes without hesitation, allowing me to breathe easier. Immediately after taking out the spider, he crossed paths with the chattering man, 5'11", 180 centimeters, 144 pounds, 66 kilograms, mid-earthquake tier. As much as I hated sympathizing with Nazis, the guy couldn't seem to catch a break. Resembling a horribly slouched humanoid, the chattering man was the kind of creature that parents told their kids about in an attempt to scare them into being good. Each and every one of his limbs were jagged and contorted, covered by thin, borderline translucent skin that was still inexplicably bulletproof. His eyes were covered in a damp, bloody, and dirty cloth, while his long, black matted hair swayed wildly as he twitched around. And then there was his teeth. They were giant, about twice the size of a normal human's, and coinciding with his name, rapidly and constantly chattered like hell, yielding one of the most disturbing sounds imaginable. Adrian slammed his fists on the table in excitement. Yes! This is a matchup I've been waiting to see! The chattering man stared the Nazi down, his teeth rattling together like a frenzied, demonic drum. The Nazi responded by abruptly engulfing him in a sea of flames. However, the chattering man simply walked through it completely unscathed. I could see the Nazi clench his jaw in apparent frustration. He drew his knife and rushed in, attempting to engage him up close. The chatterer was surprisingly fast, dodging each slash before biting down on the Nazi's flamethrower tank. The subsequent explosion flung them both into the air, destroying a good portion of the Nazi's back in the process. On the other hand, the chattering man only suffered a few cracked teeth. Holy hell, I muttered. Truth be told, I never actually seen the chattering man in action up until that point. Perhaps we had been lowballing him on the threat scale. The Nazi let out a hoarse scream before rushing back towards his disturbing opponent. He managed to sink his blade into the chattering man's shoulder before being blindsided by a swipe to the face, completely shattering what remained of his mask, revealing his full, zombified visage beneath. The chattering man surged his head forward, biting a large chunk of the Nazi's face off, causing spurts of dark green blood to explode everywhere. He followed it up by ripping an arm off, before savagely beating the undead soldier with his own appendage. The Nazi attempted one last stand, grabbing the knife that was still lodged inside the chattering man's shoulder, carving a large gash that extended down to his rib cage. Nevertheless, his admittedly impressive run was finally over. Not seeming to acknowledge the wound at all, the chattering man plunged two bony fists into the Nazi's chest before ripping his torso in half. Quite the gruesome display for sure, but Adrian seemed to revel in it. He let out a raucous cheer for the victor. What the hell is wrong with this guy? I thought to myself. Tossing that thought aside, it became apparent that things were beginning to come down to the wire. Cale and Hugo had found themselves within the vicinity of the dancing guy. 5'7", 170 centimeters, 155 pounds, 71 kilograms. He was an ordinary-looking, albeit racially ambiguous man in his mid-20s with short light brown hair and a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, dressed in a plain white t-shirt and track pants. He always wore a pair of unbranded earbuds connected to an MP3 that never seemed to run out of battery. And, of course, he never stopped dancing. He was a mid-asteroid, the third strongest being within the entire chasm. Hell, it was entirely possible that he is actually the strongest. We've never seen him fight against the top two after all, so just how the hell was an ostensibly innocuous man so dangerous? Who the hell knew? Like most of the prisoners, he was truly beyond explanation. If I had to classify him, he'd be 100% chaotic neutral. He had no conception of good or evil, no sense of right or wrong, no goals, no ideals. The guy just wanted to dance, and he sure as hell was a menace while doing so. Yet he would never go out of his way to bother you. You just had to stay out of his. He could disintegrate people just by touching them. He'd simply dance through your body, leaving nothing but shreds of flesh and blood behind. And if you ever tried stopping him, oh boy. You see, his eyes were always closed when he was dancing to the music funneling into his ears. If that music ever stopped, then he'd be forced to open them up, and then all hell would break loose. He'd go on a rampage until he got those earbuds back, and nothing could take him down in the process. Nothing. For that reason, it was better to leave him undisturbed, allowing him to dance to his heart's content. For that reason, his holding cell was the largest, giving him plenty of room to do so. Fun fact, he listens to many genres, but his favorite is EDM, specifically melodic trance and hardstyle. But now, he was out. Bad news for everybody, and Cale knew it.
Damn,
He muttered.
we're not dealing with that.
Why?
Hugo asked.
Is he strong?
Cale nodded.
More than you know.
Then that's all the more reason why we need to eliminate him.
Hugo said, attempting to crawl towards the dancer. But before he could make the biggest mistake of his life, Cale scooped him up and began running in the other direction.
Let's not do that.
Yeah, the big boys are coming out. Adrian's abrupt shout nearly shattered my eardrums. I glanced over to see which monitor he was looking at, and then I understood his excitement. Satanbot had come across his next opponent, but it wasn't one he was going to have such an easy time with. Standing opposite of him on a walkway on the very top floor was Long Wu, aka the Mechanical Menace, 6'9", 205 centimeters, 375 pounds, 170 kilograms. He was a mid-asteroid, right in between the Calamity and the Dancing Guy in terms of estimated strength. He was actually a special case, you see. He was originally held in the Chinese equivalent of the chasm, known as the well. However, as a political favor, a complicated exchange, mind you, the US allowed the PRC to transfer Wu over. This was shortly after he killed 400 plus guards and nearly escaped entirely. They just really didn't want to deal with him anymore. He was also interesting in the sense that he wasn't born with any supernatural abilities or superhuman prowess. His danger came from his brilliant but unhinged mind and his obsession with the concept of transhumanism and being the change that shifts humanity into a new technological age. His original progress-driven ideals could have been deemed noble at some point, but then he went off the deep end with power and decided to prove just how much better we could be once we had fully integrated ourselves with technology. And how did he decide to do this? By trying to kill anybody and everybody he saw. His power came from his suit, which he had apparently semi-fused with his own body. It was comprised of a dark, unidentified metal that had so far proved to be unbreakable. With it, he had a vast arsenal of devastatingly overpowered weapons at his disposal. Machine guns, shotguns, explosives, knives, you name it. Both the eyes on his helmet were also capable of firing railgun blasts. But his most powerful weapon was something he called the Singularity Blade. That weapon was where the science ended and the messed up stuff began. Standing about 5 feet long and glowing a deep ember, his sword was an enigma. I'm not sure how he made it or what he did to attain it, but it sure as hell wasn't the result of any kind of engineering. Any time that he swung it, a sharp, ear-splitting roar could be heard from everywhere and nowhere at once. And then, from the tip of the blade, some kind of ghost-like serpent-esque entity would emerge, utterly alienating anything in the area with its flames, fangs, and claws. You could only see it for about a second, and most guards were under the impression that it didn't even exist. But it does, and it's haunting. They're gonna destroy this place, Sandu said. Adrian pulled out an old-looking pack of peanuts from his back pocket, stuffing a handful in his mouth. You got that right, he shouted, spitting crumbs everywhere. Wu took the first offensive, unleashing a typhoon of bullets from a chain gun that jutted out from his chest. Satanbot managed to dodge every shot, closing the distance between them in the process. But of their movements were incredibly hard to follow, of course. Once he got close, he attempted to strike Wu with his tail, only to have it blocked by a large shield that abruptly materialized from his forearm. Wu attempted to slice the tail off with a large axe, but Satanbot managed to evade the blow at the last second. I suddenly understood why he was so dangerous. Unlike Satanbot, whose weapons were already fixed on his body, Wu's suit was capable of adapting to any situation, morphing its robotic appendages into whatever weapon was best suited to countering his opponent. Jesus Christ, I muttered at the realization. This guy's a freaking monster. Even though Satanbot had managed to dodge that strike, the next one would prove more difficult to evade. In a borderline flash-like movement, Wu threw a Maui Thai kick at Satanbot's side, piercing it with a spike that protruded from the tip of his boot. He finished the combo by transforming his fist into a tool comparable in appearance to a meat grinder, drilling it into Satanbot's shoulder, tearing an arm off in the process. Adrian groaned. Ugh. And here I thought the devil robot was going to put up more of a fight. But he spoke too soon. After taking the hit, Satanbot was already on the counter, whipping his tail around to strike the side of Wu's head. Wu recoiled slightly, still managing to destroy one of Satanbot's knees with a railgun blast as he staggered. He was about to finish the job when a large cannon materialized from Satanbot's torso. A hidden last-stand weapon, I suppose. From the barrel, it fired out an immense blast of purple energy that Wu barely had time to dodge as it scorched the side of his helmet. It blew a gigantic hole in the fortified ceiling, causing sunlight to leak in. Keep in mind that we were also about 100 feet underground. But Wu didn't give Satanbot any more time to reveal any further tricks, blasting its body to bits with a brutal spray from an automatic grenade launcher. It seemed as if Adrian was going to pass out from the excitement. "That's my boy!" he shouted. "Screw Bones, we're gonna win this whole tournament ourselves!" What I hadn't noticed was Belle and Luz watching the whole encounter from behind cover. Bella's eyes lit up upon seeing the hole. Rather convenient escape route. She ran out from her hiding spot before leaping an extraordinary distance into the air, right towards freedom. But then, out of nowhere, a massive, armored hand grabbed her by the neck. From the surface, a gigantic man, dressed in a streamlined mech suit of a model that I wasn't familiar with, dropped down, landing hard on the walkway. He continued to nonchalantly strangle Bella as he surveyed the scene.
What a mess.
His booming voice reverberated through the monitors.
It's time to enforce justice.
If Adrian was giddy before, he was off the rails now. They're here! They're finally here! It's time for the semi-finals! Who the hell is here? I asked, already somewhat knowing the answer. The Alpha Boys and Girls, the Apex Predators, he responded. Task Force Void Nova Hammer.